Perfect. Welcome, everybody. We've got some people still coming in and logging in. We've got a pretty good crowd of people attending this today, which is fantastic. This is our third grouping of these virtual coffee chats. So it's been great to see the growth in it and the engagement from everybody across North America, and we've had some great engagement from Australia as well. So I've been getting different opinions and different thoughts on activity that are going on in sponsorship. Just want to I'm going to set up the conversation today and walk you through some of the elements. If you've not used Zoom before, there's the ability to turn on and off your mic. So just down here on the left-hand side is where you can turn your mic on and off. You can turn your video on and off. In the middle of the section, there is a chat window. So you can open up the chat and you can send broadcast across everyone, or if you want to send it directly to myself, Aaron, or Mary Beth, you can. I'll be monitoring the conversation and the questions throughout the session today. And then on the top, just onto the top right-hand side, there's a feature that you'll see speaker view or gallery view. You can toggle back and forth between the two. So the gallery view gives you a full tile of everybody who's on the call, and if you just want to see the people who are speaking at the time, you can just put it on speaker view. So play with that as you like. And to get you set up today, we're going to be talking about pivoting your tech, looking at how moving to a virtual world, everybody's events are changing. How can we implement that? Are there some really good examples and some failings that have happened so far? We've got Aaron Kaufman from Fifth Element Group here, who definitely runs a large range of big scale events and has been happy to share some of his opinions about things that we can do to create new activation and bring our partners on board and deliver our events in a different fashion. And then Mary Beth Kyer from the Sponsor Circle team here, who has a wealth of experience delivering online communications from brand perspective, both internal and external, and has worked with large scale companies across North America. So it'd be an interesting look at sort of the business perspective and then the event perspective. Feel free to jump in with your questions. We're trying to set this up as a sort of communal conversation. As much as I know Aaron and Mary Beth can talk for the full hour, we'd love to hear from other people, so don't be shy. And you can jump in at any time, put your questions into the chat, and then I'll be catching that as we go through and feeding those to Mary Beth and Aaron. And at this time, I'll pass it off to Mary Beth, and you can lead the conversation.
Great. Thanks so much, Brad. Welcome, everyone. It's really great to see everyone on board. We have a good number of participants, as Brad has already mentioned, and we really do want to encourage conversation. I have set it up so that the mic can be unmuted by you if you have any questions, and this is really your session, so ask away. So even since we've started doing these webinars, things have changed so dramatically, and really every day there are new things happening in the world of events or things that are not happening in the world of events. Now, we're so happy to have Aaron here today, and there are quite a few folks on the call that you know, but for those who don't know you, you are often described as a change maker and a really huge proponent of strategy. So in the world of events, perhaps I can pass it over to you and you can tell us a little bit more about your approach.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, thank you everybody for joining. I know at this point in the pandemic, I guess we are watching a lot of webinars. And so hopefully this one we can keep kind of light and easy and informative, and we can make sure that certainly it's collaborative. So, the best thing that I think Mary Beth and Brad and myself can do for you is leave you with something to think about or something to action. So if there are questions, definitely please, please be forward with those, and we're happy to answer anything. In terms of, what I do, so Fifth Element Group is a full-serve management and design firm. We like to coin ourselves a live experience firm. So we differ than a regular event company from the standpoint that we do like to start from the beginning working with corporations and foundations on their strategy. And when we talk about a live experience, different than a live event, certainly it leaves the the openness of being able to do things on various levels, whether it be virtual, live, hybrid. And I think, one of the things about working more in strategy, and as we get older and more mature as a company, that's something a lot of our clients are coming to us with, sorry. But I think it allows us to control a little bit more of the conversation around what people are experiencing and how they're experiencing it. And so that's really why it's been a slow pivot, because it's, a service that you kind of have to build up and you have to have the framework for. But certainly we've been working on that for quite some time. And, over the last few weeks, it's become a really valuable asset to have in-house. And I'm sure I'll share some opinions about, what the industry is doing and how we're kind of differing. But, I kind of want to make sure that people are kind of learning the difference between, some of those things. And so and I'm happy to have everyone here, and I'm happy to be here. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
That's awesome. Great. Certainly tech and advancing tech is a huge topic for me. There have been so many changes in the last 5 or 6 years. It relates to communicating more effectively. And in our world of events, it's really not only just small meetings, it's also really large conferences, virtual conferences, certainly that you have experience putting on. And so as we're approaching the event season, which has typically been the summertime, what is your advice to properties and sponsors right now that we're planning to do events? What are you saying to them right now?
Yeah. So we're getting a lot of calls, potentially from, all sorts of people from all different sectors. And the first thing that I'm saying is, evaluate the team that you have working for you. While that sounds like a really weird first step, what I'm finding in the industry a lot now is people are really confused. And they're really confused because they can't draw out tangible results from trends that they've been following. So when I say that, I mean that 4 or 5 years ago, everyone kind of jumped on the festival bandwagon, and everyone said the place that you need to be is festivals, right? You need to activate at festivals. You need to go to festivals. You need to participate, sponsor, whatever it is. And so everyone kind of jumped on that bandwagon. And then you found about 3 years ago, clearly the trend to go to was pop-up. Everyone wanted activations and pop-up activations and opportunities to, get their stuff online, right? So take a picture with this in the background, and then, it serves a dual purpose, because now you get to be somewhere live and then post it online, and those things would, go viral, right? So you'd have a viral campaign of a real live activation. And with those you could measure, right? So X amount of impressions plus X amount of people attended, all of those things. And one of the things that, we're talking about a lot right now is how the process drives sales, right? And so what you're finding now is and I go back to the beginning of what I started saying, when you're looking at auditing your team, the reason why I say that is because you want a team that understands the entire landscape of kind of looking at sponsorships and looking at activations and looking at all of those things and kind of determining what metrics you need. And what you're finding right now is that everything is still so very segmented or fragmented in the industry that you talk to your agency of record for marketing and they're all looking at each other going, well, I don't know what to do right now, right? Because they need an agency like, a live event agency or another agency, and they're all looking at each other and going, I don't know what to do. And the missing piece is the actual strategy. And when I talk about the strategy, I talk about from beginning to end. So not just what can we do? It's easy to follow a trend and say we could do a pop-up, right? But why are we doing it? How are we doing it? What is it supposed to accomplish? And so there needs to be strategy behind it. And I think that that's really the thing. So the first piece is look at who your agencies are. If they're not able to be creative in a time like this, and by the way, for everybody on the call right now, you are allowed to be creative in times like this. there is a sensitivity around it, but you don't have to stop being creative. Marketing and advertising has got through every incredible challenge the last 100 years, right? So you can be creative still. And I think what's happened right now is the agencies are so entrenched in, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a pop-up. We're going to follow that with an Instagram campaign. We're going to, those things, that now what's happened is they have no ability to pivot and they don't know what to do. And now all of a sudden everyone's an online expert, right? Because they weren't before. And so now they're going, well, how do we do this virtually? And how do we do this? And what is this about? And I'm saying, all this stuff's been available for years, right? But hasn't necessarily been the trend. It's been a trend. It's always been a trend to find, how do we Instagram? And then influencers became a thing, but not every industry can use influencers. So I go back to the beginning and I say, audit your team, because the team of people you have working for you, I guarantee you, are not the right team that you should be using. And you're going to find that out right now when they don't know what they're doing.
Okay. All right. So so what would be a way to, if somebody has a bit of a loose strategy in place, what would you recommend that they firm up right away?
Well, I think it's what is it that you actually want to accomplish? So I think that, there really is an idea that right now the world has stopped. And I've heard so many people say, well, people aren't working. And, my reaction to that is, I've worked harder the last month than I think I've ever worked. Right. And there's a number of reasons. One, I have a wonderful team of people and I need to keep the doors open. So, clearly that's number one. But number two, I am showing the value in what we do right now. Right. And I have doubled down on conversations like this and individual conversations with corporations and associations on what we do. And I think right now when you're looking at it, I think that there is just so much that you can do. There is so much messaging available. And there's so much opportunity to be creative. And I think right now everyone just needs to take a breath and they need to say that creativity is allowed to happen. And here's how we need to engage. Look, people are home, right? I don't know if that's a secret for everyone here, but people are home. They're online all day, every day. They're engaged.
Yeah.
Right. And it was interesting to me that the hospitality industry, so the hospitality industry here in Toronto, and I know it's happened in a lot of cities, everyone's turning everything purple for the hospitality industry. And everyone in the hospitality industry is posting that online, right? That is, in theory, a live activation that's going viral.
Yeah.
Right? There are, and it's a positive message, and it's telling people that, the hospitality industry is resilient and hotels will be back, and it gives messaging for, the Marriotts and the Hiltons and all of those. That's content. And so I think everyone should be looking to drive content. I think everyone should be looking to be creative. I think everyone should be looking to be authentic. But we have never had a more captivating audience for sponsorships and for companies and for messaging than we do right now.
Yeah.
Right?
I absolutely agree. And when you talk about people are not working or people are working, and whether or not it's the right time to be working with, looking for new sponsors or, how to pivot all at the same time, you're trying to think of, thinking out of the box. There are always going to be organizations in these kinds of times that are going to be doing well. Think of what we're buying or what we're doing. And so there will always be those nuggets of organizations that want to support. I think moving towards a more kind of impact-based sponsorship is timely right now. And let's touch on some of the technology. Maggie's mentioned she agrees that there's a lot of resources that have always been available. And this is really kind of, where I have been over the last 15 years, and that is a lot of building technology to communicate more effectively, both to employees, but then also to your customers. And for anyone who is on the brand side of things and are looking to try to create these virtual conferences, to really look to your learning and development department. They have been running really large scale conferences, employee engagement conferences for at least 3 or 4 years, and they're a really great place to start because they would have gone through a lot of platforms already to determine which ones work well. And perhaps you'd like to talk to you a little bit about your experience, Erin, in particular, the new concept of hybrid conferences and what that sounds like and looks like for you.
Sure. So, I mean, I want to touch on the technology piece that you were just talking about real quick before I get into the hybrid stuff. And I want to say, for people who are a little confused as to how to engage people, one of the search tools that people have been using for, I don't even know when it started, but outside of Google, if you were to say, how do you search for something, especially through social media, the easiest way to find anything, whether it be a campaign or otherwise, is a hashtag. And so, it is such a simple thing, and it is such a simple, piece of information where you can deliver a message or be found. And so, I think that that's one of the things that I've been talking to clients a lot about. And that's a little tidbit that I haven't given out on any of my other online interviews at this point, other than this one. But to say that hashtags are a thing that, it's not new and it's not mind bending, but used right in conjunction with a strategy can be incredibly effective in drawing attention. And so that's certainly something to talk about. In terms of hybrid, again, I think, that all using tools that are available to you and then leveraging what the future could look like, that to me is what a hybrid event is. So right now, you cannot plan a hybrid event. And the simple reason is that I have no idea as to when restrictions are going to be lifted. And the truth of the matter is, although, I make my bread and butter putting, people face to face, I don't want them lifted anytime soon. I think that, one of the things that this is going to do for our industry, it's going to shrink it quite a bit. And I love that Fifth Element Group is considered a leader. So I'm staying focused on working for my clients and being able to deliver experiences for them no matter what. If someone comes to me and says November, December, we're ready to get to work, but our contracts right now are very loose so that we can pivot very easily. And we're able to gain the trust from our clients that we know how to pivot easily, which is where everyone else is really lost. Hybrid for me right now, though, looks at a campaign that can engage people with an ending perhaps that's face-to-face. So I don't, if someone generally does their AGM, let's say in November, right? We don't have a sense of what's going to happen in November. And hopefully everyone's well, and this is not a big deal, right? But will big groups get together? I mean, right now, being the designated grocery shopper in my house, that kind of, makes me nervous to go to the grocery store, right? And so I don't, and I don't want my wife going to the grocery store at all, right? So how can I justify, if I were to say, okay, I'm going to go do an event for 250 people, I don't know when I'm going to feel good about that. Now, one of the things that we can start to do now, though, to drive the conversation is start campaigns early. Start them now. Come up with clever and creative ways to engage people, right? And then move forward with a plan and a strategy to activate face-to-face at a future date. Now, you can have a date in mind, but certainly, you want to have contingent 1, contingent 2, and contingent 3. And that's what we're doing with clients. We're risk assessing as we go. We're strategy planning as we go. And for so many people, a live event or a hybrid event or an online event is simply about messaging, right? And no matter what department you work with or no matter where you go, for all of the people on here, what this requires and what it should always require, so hopefully this is a fresh start, is a strategy, right? And you should be able to pivot from strategy. And I think that, in marketing, ad, PR, and especially in live events, people have forgotten that because it's been more about trend. Someone sets a trend, everyone follows it. A new trend happens, everyone follows it, and they've forgotten to be creative. And so that's why all the companies are banging their heads on the wall right now. But we're lucky in that, my team is wonderful, and I know a bunch of them are listening, so I'm going to keep praising them. And we are working really hard right now with all of our clients to really put in play the idea that even if you're used to doing your major national conference in November or December, start now. Start the conversation, start doing surveys online, create your hashtag, start putting out content now, start talking about, what that looks like, and engaging people so that they'll be excited. Because if given the opportunity in October to register for a conference in November, maybe people are on the fence. But if you're talking about it now and people come out of this with a heightened awareness of your conference, your organization, your brand, they're going to want to engage with it first. They're going to go, you know what, the first conference I'm going to go to is this one in November. I'm excited about it. Right? Yeah. And I think, so you got to start driving that conversation now. And especially if you're an organization that has sponsorship or, various other things, those sponsors, you need to start delivering extra value, because your conference that might have had 1,000 people before might only have 600. Right? Yeah. But showing now that you can do it so that you can look at online impressions, you can look at, various different revenue funnels for sponsors, for exhibitors, and for conference organizers. I think, you got to start now, and you got to be able to move with the times. I think you got to be able to use all the tools at your discretion, and people are trying to learn very quickly, like, what is TikTok? What is Instagram? Twitch has been a thing that people are using right now. A lot of online tools, a lot of webinars, a lot of conversations, but it needs to move at a fast pace, and it needs to move now in order to create a hybrid event months from now.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And, when you talk about the amount of time, we're not really sure when we're ever going to be able to get together face to face. In the chat here, I can see, thank you, Victoria. It's great to see you on the call again today. She's talking about Vegas conferences have been canceled until 2021. And Gary, you've mentioned that they're trying to start them back up in July, but already there's just so much uncertainty. So yeah, you don't want to hang your hat on plan A and not have a plan B.
And Gary, by the way, has a wonderful company out in Las Vegas, and I'm a very big fan of his. And he is someone who pushes things and is incredibly innovative. And I think there are ways to leverage people for messaging, and certainly like what you see behind him. I know that he has done a wonderful job in turning words into art. There he goes. And so,
very nice, Gary.
And so, there are certainly, again, ways to use tools online and otherwise to create art and messaging and all sorts of things. And I hope Vegas starts up, because when they do, I think the rest of the world will be not too far behind.
I want to touch on what you said about forcing people to think outside the box. Sometimes people are afraid, don't want to do something different than what your predecessor did, and maybe not necessarily comfortable in making that step out. But there's some really, really interesting things that are happening right now. I want to touch on one of our customers is in the wine business, and they've got some really good B2B conversations going on, but then when it comes to actually consumer engagement, naturally they don't have anything. They've typically leaned on their wineries as the experience. That is their live activation, 24/7, or at least whenever it's open. And so we're looking at different ways to be able to find a new way to engage. And some of the different things that are happening is delivering wine to wine clubs, little mini wines, so that you have your webinar and you have your wine club, but that you're actually sharing and doing a formal tasting together, and you all have the same wines together. So even though it's still virtual, there's an element of physical relationship, because everyone is sitting there with the same bottle of wine. So there's some really interesting examples of how you can actually change it up, and it can be pretty darn awesome, and have the legs to it even after we go back to doing physical events.
Yeah, I think the first thing I want to touch on is this box, right? Because in a lot of the talks that I do, people say to me, what is creativity to you? And I remind people that there is no actual definition of creativity, right? There's no real definition. It's undefined. Creativity is, it's in our mind, right? And so, I even spent time talking to my kids the other day about the idea of relearning how to use their imagination, right? So I have twin boys, they're 6, and I have a daughter who's 9, and they're awesome. But, in schools and stuff like that, it's very mechanical, do your math, do your this, read your book. And there's very little talk about imagination anymore. And so, I think part of the thing that we talk about is the outside of the box. And I challenge people that I don't know, whoever came up with this box theory is insane, because what happened is, they kind of took everyone and said, well, you're all in this box, get out of this box, right? And now I'm going, you know what? The place that I really want to be right now in this world is inside that box, because it's empty. And everybody's trying so hard to be different. And nobody's saying that it needs to be different, right? And I think that's where the challenge is. I think the creative aspect lies in using all of the tools you have at your discretion, right? And creating a strategic campaign around them. Virtual events are not new. Hybrid events are not new. I did one in 2006, an industry conference that had a bunch of speakers going to Europe. They canceled a week before, and a lot of people got really saddled with a lot of debt in terms of, having booked flights that they were promised to be paid back for, et cetera. And in a 3-week time period, myself and 2 other people in the industry created this conference called Control-Alt-Delete. And we rebooted the industry of events and conferences and meetings. And we had 1,200 people attend, and we had 17 live locations from around the world. We had Holland, Africa, all over the place. And we had speakers from all over the place. During the breaks, we were able to live broadcast different people doing different things all around the world. So this is not new, right? Is it more used now? Of course, but it's not new. And so what I'm telling people is this. Again, I lean on the strategy piece so much, because you can go to your person at your company or whatever else and say, we want to do a virtual event. But unless you're changing what the actual tangible action items are, so what? Right? Because you're not going to do a virtual event and get the same results. So now you have to figure out a way to either get the results you're looking for by using a number of different tools, or adjust the results that you're looking for, understanding that you're going to do a virtual event. And the other thing that I will tell people always is hire a producer still. Don't just think that you can buy a platform and get on it. It's incredibly difficult to do, to run properly. So again, that box theory that we go back to, I think, I say no box, no rules. Messaging is important. Strategy is important. But, if you got to do something for your brand, for fundraising, especially, that's another big one right now. A lot of charities and associations and organizations are, going to be very short on their budgets. That's a challenge. And so, and I will tell you going forward, because I know you're asking me what I'm talking to people about hybrid events, and I like to kind of jump all over the place, but I actually spoke to an economist from a very big client of mine last week, and they advised that, and I hadn't really thought about this, but usually in Q2 is when budgets for the following year get delivered, right? And one of the things they're talking about right now is on marketing, especially around live events and conferences. What they're anticipating is they'll take a 20% loss this year on canceled contracts and stuff. And so they're delivering a budget with about a 60% expenditure for next year, less that 20. So in real dollars, you're looking at about a 40% of what they would usually spend for next year. And so this is going to have to be long-term play and long-term strategy, and really exciting times, though. I think it's exciting to learn who your real creative strategic partners can be.
Thinking about the long-term game, and also, how best to kind of, look to next year for budgets and all of that. When it comes to strategy, you can figure out whether or not you're being successful against your strategy if you're measuring it. So what are some of the things when it comes to, measurement? How is it making it to sales, or is it, brand awareness?
Mhm.
Brian is asking, you could chat a little bit about data and how it comes into play for virtual events. How best to cultivate and analyze that data to activate on it.
Yep. Well, I think just like any other event we do anytime that has, tangible outcomes or, specific numbers to it, I think you're going to measure very much the same way. I think what's important is not actually how we measure or what we're measuring, but what we're delivering. And I think that, the messaging that's being delivered now will help you determine what those data points are. And it's hard, and I appreciate the question. It's really challenging to answer a question like that because I don't know, in what industry and what type of product.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly a lot of people will look at right now are looking at impressions. Impressions are clearly a big thing. A lot of people are looking at joint ventures with charitable organizations right now to measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So $1 of every sale goes to this if you use this link.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So clearly, in the easiest form, if an organization is able to sell online and they're posting a link somewhere with some sort of messaging and it's being used, then I think that certainly how many click-throughs you're going to get and stuff like that. I think the real measurement won't come for another 12 to 18 months. And so I would say, sorry, I forget who asked the question. Brian. I would say, Brian, keep track of all of the pieces in your campaign. And in 18 months, you'll be able to determine which ones worked best. What I love about hashtags, though, is they're always searchable, and historical data is very easy, as is a lot of other tools. And so you're able to see, how that picked up. And the most interesting part will be if you start an online campaign now, and you're looking for any hashtags for sure. If you start an online campaign now, and you're looking for results in February 2021, you're going to see the up and down of that hashtag depending on how you're advertising your final live experience or whatever else. And that will help you to show also how your marketing has been doing and how your sales approach and how your messaging is.
Right.
And so there is really right now, as opposed to a client calling me and saying, okay, in 4 weeks, I want to do a pop-up and we're going to do it for, 5 days over a long weekend, or whatever else. And then we measure how many people came in, how many purchases were made, how many click-throughs, how many people reposted that photo, online, whatever else. I think right now you're looking at a long play, and I would be tracking days, weeks, and months based on a well-strategized campaign.
So really it means it's you're still leaning on the strategy, and it kind of plays into if you think about a physical conference, there's really two elements to it. There is you want to meet people and you want to learn something, and so it doesn't really matter what the vehicle is. Those are still the two things that need to happen. And so thinking about training, I do a lot of work with Loblaws and TELUS, and they're trying to engage huge employee groups that are around the world. And so when e-learning and virtual conferences started coming up, people were like, oh wow, that's not as good. But ultimately, it's, as you said, the content. It needs to be good. It needs to be directed. It needs to be measured. The vehicle upon which that information is given to you, sure, it changes a little bit, but it doesn't change the goals of the content, the goals of the overarching goals of the training. And so the same thing happens with the conference. So long as you're making and choosing technology that supports the overall arching strategies for for the attendees as well as the sponsors, then you're hitting the ground running. We're going to be chatting, I guess it's going to be next week or the week after next, with Amex. We'll be talking about how they're leveraging on 24 technology to create these virtual trade shows, and how we're still getting through the sales process, or helping attendees get through the sales conversion, but it's just in a different way.
Yeah, and I think we want to be smart, because one of the things that Meeting live, I think, evokes emotion, right? And
That's
so you can meet live and you can watch people on stage and whatever else, and even if the speakers weren't the best, people can, walk away and go, okay, that wasn't necessarily the best speaker, or maybe you didn't learn too much or whatever else, but you had a good time, so positive reviews. I think right now what we're going to see is that when we're creating these campaigns for companies and for organizations, if you have 50 people that are all engaging, those 50 people are going to react very differently individually, right? Because you're not actually able to go up to them and shake their hand.
for sure.
Right? So you're taking kind of that personal face-to-face emotion away, and you're just being graded on your campaign and your strategy and your content. And that's going to change the way people are engaging with your brand.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, so Victoria is saying the networking definitely isn't the same. So how could we, just brainstorming any ideas from, from you about how you can still encourage networking in an online environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think contesting is a great opportunity, right?
Okay.
Who wants to meet? Who wants to talk to? There are brain dates which can happen as part of virtual conferences where you're able to facilitate one-on-one meetings. I think it's still about facilitation, right? And so it's just like a breakout at a regular conference where people want to kind of go and have a little bit more personalized learning. And so they do that. I think we still have to understand that people will tend to behave the same, right? I'm not a different person, I'm a little bit different. I've been locked inside for over a month, but I'm not at the core, I'm not a different person, right? And so I think what has to happen is we have to realize that people naturally are going to want to congregate. How we facilitate that and what the messaging is behind it is really important. And I saw somebody, Susan Jasper, asked to cover platform choices. And I have a really, I have an easy answer for that. The platform doesn't matter. The person who's running it matters. What you want to do with it matters. But you should never pick an organization to work with. If you're a planner in-house at this point, you should be hiring someone who has expertise, in my opinion, at least. You should never be auditing software. There is hundreds of companies right now. It is a giant mess and a whole bunch of noise right now. And everyone says they can do things, but that's because a company has scaled up all of a sudden from, a maximum of 250. They found a way in the last couple of weeks, all of a sudden, to scale up to 1,000 people. And we all know what that means. And so the platform doesn't matter. It still matters who's running it. There is still speaker procurement. There is still potentially breakouts. Do you need polling? Things like that. And that's going to require management. And that doesn't change whether you're live or online, and hasn't from before this and won't after.
Seamless transitions from a main stage virtual conference to the breakout rooms, depending on the functionality of the platform, can really be beautiful and smooth, or it can be just a terrible train wreck that you lose people, or they don't know what room they're in. The speakers are having troubles with even running their own sessions, just because of what I've been doing over the last number of years, there are definitely some tools out there that you can leverage that are quite good, and I can share some of them with you. But I mean, again, to emphasize the importance of ensuring that you have a team behind you to run it smoothly, because there is nothing like trying to run an event without an event planner. It's fine for dinner and drinks with friends, but when you start getting serious and you're actually trying to execute on a strategy or to satisfy the requirements of your sponsors, it gets a little risky when you don't have folks behind you.
Yeah, and especially when sponsors want to say, like, they want information, right? Or they want updates. And we're talking about, sponsorships and partnerships and all of those things. They're going to want the same type of coverage, the same type of engagement. And so no platform, really addresses those things. And that's where you need, some people to be able to do the right things.
Yeah. I'm going to share my screen with a couple of of platforms that I have worked with and I'm familiar with over and have used over the last little bit. And I'll just to talk a little. Whoops, that's not great. Here we are. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the really, there's a couple of platforms that I have listed here. And I mean, as Aaron said, there are a huge, vast number of platforms out there. And it really comes down to what your overall arching goals are. And is it just a small virtual meeting? Is it a broadcast? Do you want to have breakout sessions? Do you want to have ease of use for your attendees as well as your speakers? That's really critical. So I'm just going to touch on a couple. We're on Zoom today, and Zoom has really good audio. It's pretty important to keep people engaged. You need to be able to ensure that it's a seamless conversation and that the audio and the visual are working fairly well. They have a whole bunch of different types of platforms. So rather than just, the cheap seats where it goes up to 100, there is other functionality and broader offering from Zoom. It's, and I've always said that when it comes to technology, the worst thing you can do is put a barrier in front of using it. So if people are familiar with Zoom or familiar with platforms, then they don't have to learn about a platform in order to get to your conference. So, making sure that you're working with the right people and, using tools that that function similar to what users are familiar with.
Yeah, no, I will say in this area, one of the things to really keep in mind, and this is kind of why you hire someone who's an expert, you want to make sure that you're working with organizations that aren't going to bind you to contracts, that can allow you for growth. I think, in addition to these, which I'm familiar with, the two that I've been using most are in Expo, and there's a wonderful platform called Hey Summit, which is great. I get nervous about sometimes saying, some of these things like Zoom and things like that, people go, oh, well, I could do that. Right. And, times are a little tough and stuff like that. So again, I'm really cognizant about those types of things. I think Glisser is another one out of the UK, which is a wonderful platform, Glisser and Glisser Live, which allows for a lot of interaction. So again, I think you need to know how much interaction you're going to be. Are you going to need to poll people? If it's an AGM, do you need secure voting? All of those things go into play in picking a platform, and that's really what you need a producer for.
Yep, for sure. I'm a big fan of Hopin. I've been on it a couple of times, and they're a UK company, and it's just a beautiful software. And on top of that, they have a really great way to be able to showcase your sponsor. So screen, when you're in a virtual conference, obviously you want to have an opportunity for your sponsors to have some good presence, and they do a really good job of being able to profile sponsors at the same time as having really good breakout rooms, and then back to multiple main stages. It's really good. So yeah, I'm not involved with, I'm not they're not paying me. I'm just, my professional opinion of how it gone. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I think somebody else was talking about in Expo as well.
Yeah, I think in Expo is a big one. They're owned by, or now part of Intrado. They do virtual and hybrid events. They're good. Cvent is another one. If you get into the Cvent platform, there's a ton of stuff going on there.
For sure.
Again, I think there is no one platform or one strategy or plan that works for everybody. And I think it's really just a matter of what it is that you need to accomplish. I think that's really it. And I think, I've been recommending to a lot of people, go the same route that you're used to, right? Engage a conference, meeting, event company. Let them do what they do best, which is come back to you with a proposal and a pitch. on their creative, on their ideas, on their strategy, on their concepts. And then, see what happens and let them do the work for you. Oftentimes, we as event companies may already have the opportunity to, get you engaged on a platform that you're working with 2 or 3 other clients at a reduced price. And those are all benefits to working with someone who, volume buys in the industry.
Yeah.
And also, I don't spend money on features we don't need. I'm not selling anything. So for me, really, there's no reason to order features or buy features for you that you don't need, even if they're hidden in packages. And for brands, again, I think same type of thing, right? If you're going to need to do something virtually or online, or, I've been asked a couple of times recently about new product launches. And so I wanted to touch on this while I'm talking about this, because products and services even are, in R&D or research and development 18 months ago. And they're on the calendar to come out, whether we like it or not right now, and whether brands like it or not, those things are going to happen. And so how do you reveal those things? And how do you put them in the market right now, knowing that they might not be successful for a few months? And how do you keep those campaigns going? And is it a number of small virtual meetings? Is it, deliveries? Is it, getting, if I called, for example, a big hotel chain right now, right? And I said, I'm willing to pay X amount and I want to light up all your hotels with this word, on this day at this time. I would venture to say hotel brands would jump all over the opportunity of partnership. So cross partnerships right now are big. And when you get online, to have names, associated with your organization is great. There was a question about, actually, let me just touch on, so InExpo's a big one, CVent's a big one. One of the smaller ones that I was just mentioning is Hey Summit. That's a really cool one. They have a bit of a free trial going on right now. Nothing I'm affiliated with, but I've been on it a bunch of times. I think it's a good system. It's one that has no contract, which I really, really like. And so, as we kind of move through things, it'll be up to people whether they want to keep it or not. So that's that. There was a question in the questions about where do charitable organizations find affordable producers? And, clearly you're looking at one of them, but I think it's not necessarily just about being affordable right now. I think it's about added value right now. So don't look at trying to save money, look at adding value. And when I say that, I mean things like what I was just talking about. I had a meeting with a wonderful charitable organization that I work with consistently yesterday. And I said, why don't you leverage some of these outside relationships that you don't already have and offer collateral, right? So if you need something from them that can help you get to your message or what you want to get to, why don't you offer them, when you are able to do your event and online as you're approaching up to it, a logo on screen for anything you're going to do virtually, a full page ad or whatever else, just for the opportunity to get them to help you bridge to what you actually need, right? Giving away those types of things doesn't cost a thing. And so when you look at either from a brand perspective or a charity perspective or a corporate perspective, again, I'm going to keep going back to it. When you talk about, whether it's technology or live or otherwise, you need someone who has a strategy and you need someone who understands the partnerships and all of these things that can be leveraged. And I'm not talking about anything new. Partnerships were so big 15 and 20 years ago. And the bartering of partnerships and, cross-pollination through events and things like that. And then that went away. And I'm saying, use that, use the hashtags, use all of these things. So I definitely am stressing to organizations, while I understand that budgets are potentially going to be cut, I'd be careful about using things like, where do I find affordable or low cost people, but rather talk to your boards or your bosses or your brand managers about maybe trying to find organizations or people that can match you strategically, and then work on really cool initiatives for more value rather than saving money.
Okay. All right. And so you've just mentioned a couple of things that folks should look for in a production company. Anything else, like what you should look for in a production company or a content manager?
Yeah, I think so. I will say, there is a lot of desperation in the industry right now. And clearly, that comes right down to my firm as well. I mean, we all want to be working at full capacity, and anything less than full capacity gets any entrepreneur, business owner nervous, right? So Clearly, even my firm, we're not near close to capacity. We are working with clients. We are driving conversations. We are driving strategy. But I think it's important to, number one, look for an organization that can do a multitude of things for you. Again, drive that opening idea to closing idea and everything in between. They're able to really be a lot more flexible as we keep moving. And I think the other important thing is that they'll provide more value for you long-term if you piece it out to 5 different companies or organizations. So look for an event or conference company and actually sign them to an agency of record agreement. And that way they can drive your messaging and your content and everything around your experiences. I think that's number one. Number two, interview them carefully. Just because they have beautiful work on their website, it doesn't mean they actually were responsible for it. And this is a lot of case with marketing and advertising companies, specifically when brand managers go to marketing and advertising companies and see all the cool work they've done. They assume that, okay, this is what they've done, but I can't tell you how often my phone rings from marketing and advertising companies saying, oh my gosh, what should this strategy be? We need help, because it's not what they do. And the best example I have of that is, when web and SEO and everything came out, ad companies were piecing that stuff out and then saying they did it. And eventually they got wise and realized how much money they were leaving on the table, and they built a department. Mm-hmm. You would be shocked to find out how very little marketing and advertising companies do when it comes to the experience space, whether it's live or online. And right. So interview your organization, see who you will be working with specifically, and make sure that they're transparent about what they're doing. And Gary's absolutely right. Strategic partnerships. I think, go to an organization that has, partnerships in play that are willing to be transparent about them, that are willing to work as part of your team to create the campaigns that you're looking for. So, I'm really, really bullish on the idea that this is an opportunity for you to look at the people around you and ask a lot of questions and engage people who you really think can add some momentum to you now. It's easy in good times. In good times, you throw a pop-up together and people show up and it's really fun, right? But it's now where you need to find a company that's able to drive your momentum for 12 to 18 months from now. And the bad news about all of this is that there will be a second and third wave that happens, and nobody wants to start a campaign now without thinking of some of those things. So I think, you want to put all of those factors down, and you want to add, all of your metrics and all of the data that you're looking for, as I know Brian is, and you want to kind of suss out everything and look at every scenario possible. What if a second wave happens and your launch is supposed to be in November? So you start your campaign now, and all of a sudden, beginning in November, it's
not
right?
going to happen. Mm-hmm.
Where's the pivot? Because certainly you've spent a ton of money to get there, and your marketing company wants you to spend that money because they're hourly, right? So spend the money, spend the money, spend the money. We'll figure it out, right?
Yeah.
But then they're going to charge you more to figure it out and do all that stuff. So I think engage the right people, engage mm-hmm. people who have sponsorships or partnerships, I should say, and who understand how to deal with your sponsors, your product, your brand, your charity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, certainly measurement is a big component of the strategy, and it's an area that we focus heavily in on, whether it is online or in person. The importance to be able to validate that you're doing what needs to be done can only be determined if you've planned what you want to have and then you've actually measured it. So we have, we're all about technology, doing better technology for the sponsorship industry. And, we've built a dashboard in order to help folks for sponsors to be able to actually work with events more effectively, so that you have that information in front of you, so that you know that the pivots we're making are still actually executing on whatever those initial goals were. And it helps you to have a longer term relationship, since you can actually gauge, present, and talk intelligently about how, even in these difficult and changing times, that you've been able to deliver on the strategy that was determined up front, and here are the numbers to prove it. We might have done it in different ways, online as well as different types of ways, but it's still, you've landed on measuring the successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's important, last and not least, it's important to talk to people who get you.
Mhm.
You know, I think
Yeah.
it's really important. You know, I can't tell you. I know my kids were watching earlier; they're not anymore, so I can't tell you how many shitty conversations I've had with people. That's I know my aunt is watching too, so she's hearing me curse right now. And but nevertheless, you know, I've had a number of really shitty conversations with people that, you know, they either are in a situation right now where their company of record or choice
Mhm.
just doesn't have an answer for them, um, or doesn't get what it is that they need to be doing, and they're stuck with, you know, oh well, you know, I'm in a contract already, how do I get out of that? And I'm saying, I get it, like I want you to get out of it too, but that's not my business to figure out. And so, you know, I want to urge everybody, make sure that you are partnered or aligned with people that not only can understand you strategically and look at your data and, you know, work with you on everything, and, you know, make sure you can pivot, but also make sure it's someone you really like.
Yeah.
Because when these times come, especially, you know, sponsors are another one. Like sponsors who like each other, or sponsors who really appreciate an organization, they're going to stick around. They're going to figure it out. They might not take back a refund if you're a charity and just, you know, move it forward or whatever else. I think it's so important, and it's something we forget all the time. Work with
Mhm.
people you like,
Yeah.
and that you can have those hard conversations with. And, you know, someone can call me and go, Aaron, shit, I'm in a bind. What do I do? Can you, like, I know this isn't
Oh,
really part of our deal, but can I like bend your ear for an hour, and can we like do some brainstorm, you know, tomorrow
mhm.
or whatever else? And I'm always up for that, which is, you know, what makes my work so special, because I think we really have an understanding of what we do. And I'd be remiss to say that I know that you guys are really much the same, from the standpoint that you want to learn about the people who are engaging with your platform,
Yeah.
and understand the best way to help them. And that's what I love about what you guys are doing as well.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. So we're getting to the top of the hour, and so I think maybe three key takeaways for today is really, and to summarize, now is the time to be creative, I think,
Yeah,
you know, but never lose sight of the strategy that you have in place, or if you don't have one, get one. And then finally, making sure that content is king. Doesn't change whether it's online. It needs to be smooth, effortless, well done, and the content still has to be relevant and engaging.
absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so I wanted to thank you so much, Erin, for joining us today. It was really very interesting, and thank you so much for your insights and your recommendations for us at this time.
Cool.
And